Hello everyone and welcome to the next session in our Buyer Insights and Intelligence series. We kicked off the series yesterday sharing some of our research from our B2B buyers survey, which had some great foundational findings directly from B2B buyers. This next session is going to take a deeper dive look and see what buyers want, developing a buyer-focused sales and engagement process that works. We've got some really great data that's going to look at specifics around channels buyers are preferring, preference on lead follow-up. Really interesting takeaways, so I'm excited to get started with this one. A couple of quick reminders. As with all sessions in the series, we're going to try to make this an interactive conversation. We'd encourage you to share any of the findings from the survey out with your social network. We're going to be following and tracking the hashtag BII19, so we'd ask if you include that in anything you post, and we'll be monitoring that as well. You'll see some of the addresses that you can include from some of our speakers today. Quick reminder, there's also our prize pack as part of the series. The more sessions that you register for and attend, you'll increase your chances to win some really cool prizes, including free passes to our upcoming B2B Sales and Marketing Exchange in Boston next month. So hopefully you'll stay active and again share out with your networks as well. We're going to be encouraging you to submit questions. You can do that right within the On24 dashboard, right within the tab for questions. Please submit those as they come to mind. We'll save the questions for the end of the presentation. If we don't get to all your questions, we'll ask our speakers to follow up with you directly. You can also monitor some social activity right within the dashboard, and there'll be some related resources you can access as well. So I want to get started introducing today's speakers. We're going to be hearing from Daryl Pereiro, the CMO of VanillaSoft, as well as David Hood, who's CEO of VanillaSoft, who helped bring this great research to the market. Daryl's CMO of VanillaSoft. He's a high-tech marketing executive with over 25 years experience, spanning startups, consolidations, acquisitions, divestments, and IPOs. Daryl's a guest lecturer, public speaker, and radio personality, and has been featured in numerous podcasts, case studies, and best-selling books. Darryl is a former recipient of the coveted 40 Under 40 Award and has held senior executive roles in leading companies including Sybase, Cognos, WebPlan, and CML Emergency Services. Darryl will be joined by David Hood, who's the CEO of VanillaSoft. He's a successful software entrepreneur with extensive international experience in finance, business development, sales, and marketing. Under his leadership, VanillaSoft has grown over the past decade from a small startup to a leader in the inside sales and CRM space, focusing on lead management and cadence and automation. Prior to starting VanillaSoft, David was co-founder and CEO of Hamera Technologies, which grew from a basement startup to a world-class leader in digital image content space. So, Daryl and David, thanks for joining us. Really excited to get started, so let me turn it over to you guys.
All right. Thank you, Andrew. I'm very grateful for that. Welcome to the show today, folks. Really excited you're here. This is going to be a fantastic conversation about how buyers want to be sold. So let's kind of study that just for a second. What do we mean by that when we say how do buyers want to be sold? Well, contextually, there's been lots of studies done, research done on when is the right time for a sales professional to make a phone call or send an email. You know, how soon should you wait or not wait when a new lead comes in, et cetera, et cetera. You know, basically from the seller's point of view, that research is thorough, it's well documented, and we've looked at millions upon millions of records to get those insights. We ourselves, VanillaSoft, not too long ago, did a study in combination with the Telfer School of Management at the University of Ottawa, where we studied 130 million sales interactions to see what is it that sellers can do, should do, to optimize their ability to succeed at their endeavor. This study is not that. This study is the complete opposite. We have worked in partnership with the same Telfer School of Management, so they're the academic institution that has actually done this research. This is not a VanillaSoft study. This is simply a study that we helped fund. Telfer did the study. It has been academically peer-reviewed. It has been done with the rigor of an academic study and lacking any vendor bias. We've also done this in partnership with the AA-ISP, the American Association of Inside Sales Professionals. So they helped us identify over 2,000 buyers. And that could be, a head of sales, a head of marketing, but it's somebody who's got budget authority and would be involved in purchase decisions, like you might do with a sales engagement product, or maybe a marketing automation tool, or a CRM. So all the sales and marketing stack, as well as the APS, so the Association of Professional Sales, out of the United Kingdom. So this survey spans both North America, Canada, the U.S., as well as UK and parts of Europe. And what we did was we went and asked buyers, what is it you want? What is it you expect? What makes you happy and what makes you sad? So let me give you a real simple example. For years, the rule of thumb was if you got a new lead on your website, you should call within 5 minutes. Now, when we did our last study, we debunked that, and we said, really, you should wait like 30 minutes to an hour. That's what you should do. Either way, let's say 1 hour. The study says you should call within 1 hour. But when we asked buyers, we said, what if somebody called you in 5 minutes? How would you react? What if somebody called you in 30 minutes, or an hour, or 4 hours, or 8 hours, or later? How would you react? Would you be okay with that? Would you be upset? Would that tarnish your opinion of the seller? So this is very much, almost some regards, an emotional perspective, but it's all about building trust with the buyer, understanding how they want to be sold. So that's what this study is, and it's really cool because of that, because we're getting insights that we may never have gotten before. And then we went one step further. We said, let's do this throughout the entire buyer's journey. So from the start to the middle to the end, and you're going to see all that because, opinions changed. So we're really excited. That's what we did the study with these people. So it's a collaborative effort. There's no vendor bias. It is pure academic. These guys were randomly selected, which is kind of cool. I mentioned we wanted to understand buyer behavior and buyer preferences. The ultimate goal of this study is how do we improve buyer satisfaction. That's really huge. Now, I could sit here and talk about how the study was done, the statistical analysis, the survey, the types, the formats, the math. What you need to know is that it was very academic and it was very sophisticated. Now, one last thing. This is preliminary research. The study is not formally published yet, but these are findings that are available to us as we speak. So we will be following up with you on those findings in a formal report when it's done. I did mention we go through the whole buyer's journey. So it goes from the attract stage or need recognition. In other words, I have a problem. I should do something about this. To the search stage, or what marketers would call convert, where they're going, who can help me with this problem? So now they're on your website. They may be talking to a sales development rep. Evaluation stage, or the close stage. Maybe I'm talking to the account executive. All right. So we've tracked this through the buyer's journey. And God bless every single person that took the survey, because to do this, they had to answer a lot of questions. So that sets the stage. What I'm going to do is I'm going to throw it over to David. David's going to actually walk through the preliminary findings that we've uncovered as a result of asking buyers what they want. David, over to you.
Thanks very much, Daryl. So, as you were mentioning, this study is very interesting because it kind of reverses a bit what most studies have done before. In previous studies we've done, and in previous studies done by other companies, they've started with a collection of data, and they've used that data and the results of analyzing that data to infer what buyers want. So in other words, we look at the data and we say, this led to this, led to this, so that means that is what buyers want. And what's interesting about this study is we turn it around, and instead of guessing what they want, or I guess you couldn't call it guessing, but inferring what they want from data, we just ask them, what do you want? How do you prefer things? What's going to be very interesting when we finalize this is to then take the results of this study and compare it back to the studies that were driven first from the data and find out, do buyers actually walk the talk? In other words, do they say they behave the way they actually behave? And this is going to be very interesting research because it's going to help us as sellers figure out, how do we actually need to sell to people? One other thing I point out about this study that's interesting is it's not based on professional buyers. So this is not a study of large enterprise companies that have a sourcing department, that have a purchasing department. We actually went out and carried this out with people that are in purchasing decisions in small, medium-sized, and mid-market companies. So once again, I think this applies to a lot of you out there that are selling. You're selling into the VP of Sales, into the Director of R&D, into the Director of Marketing. You're selling into that level. How do these people want to be sold? Where do they learn about what they need? That's what we're going to find out. So let's start by looking at information sources. So we're going to be looking at the gold-colored bar on the top. This shows us how people responded in terms of what they prefer as information sources when they're at the need stage. So what is the need stage? That's when, as a buyer, I'm actually coming to the realization that I have a need, that I actually require a new product. So a lot of us are out there educating the market, trying to make them understand, hey, you know what your problems are, but you may not know that you have a solution for that available. That is the need stage. So how did it work out? We've organized it from the least popular down to the most popular. So we can see that paid search advertising, which a lot of us put a fair amount of budget into, doesn't rate highly when people are asked, how do you like it as an information source? Now, here comes the big surprise, social media postings. I think a lot of people would expect this to be ranking very highly in terms of buyer preference. In fact, it's the second lowest ranked information source in the study at the need stage. Next, we've got exhibitions and trade shows, so quite a few of us, so a third of people actually like that as a source. Contact by a salesperson comes next. Again, this is a traditional sales thing. People are reaching out, can be multi-channel, but actually being contacted by someone. Organic search results. I don't think this will come as a surprise to anybody. All of us prefer an organic search result. We feel it's a little less biased than the paid search, and it rates much, much higher than a paid search advertising. Now, the last two and the most popular in terms of information sources, when people are trying to identify a need, are not surprising either. Review sites. Review sites have become very popular over the last several years, and people really are using them to try and figure out, what do I need and who do I trust? The only thing that beats review sites is something that's actually quite related, word of mouth. So the only thing better than being able to go onto a review site and read what somebody said about it is to actually have someone you know tell you what they think about it. So again, we can see, and what's kind of interesting, we're going to go through each of these stages, but we can already see that the relative position of each of these information sources, although it can change internally between each of the need, search, and evaluation phases, the ranking for each stays the same throughout. So let's go take a look. We've now seen how do people identify and get information when they're trying to figure out that they actually need a new product. Let's move to the search. So at the search phase, people have identified a need. They know they have a problem. They know that there are solutions out there for that problem. So in the search phase, they're trying to figure out which companies can address my needs. So here's kind of where you're building that list of possible suppliers. So obviously, this is the stage that every company needs to get into. You can skip, if you miss out on the need phase, not as big a deal. If you miss out on the search phase, then you're just not in the game and you're not in the conversation. So what information sources do these buyers use when they're trying to draw that list of possible suppliers that they should be speaking to up? Again, paid search advertising is actually a little more popular when it comes to the search phase. So people are actually getting on and searching for Google. We can see that organic search results as well, if we look down at search, are still very, very popular. Social media postings actually decline in popularity when people are at the search phase. So in fact, it looks like people are using social media postings more at the very beginning of the funnel when they're identifying the need than they are when they're now trying to figure out which companies they should be dealing with. Not a big surprise, exhibitions and trade shows, fairly popular. 39% of people said that that's a great way for them to get out and actually figure out which companies they should be speaking with. Contact by a salesperson, a little higher than it was at the need phase. So again, and we're talking 40%, so almost 1 out of 2 people say that contact by a salesperson is a very strong or a strong source of information for them at this stage. Again, we look at what's most important, review sites and word of mouth. So again, when they're trying to identify the need, people are going to review sites and they're speaking to other people they know and respect. When it comes to shortlisting companies, people are doing exactly the same thing. They're going to those review sites and they're speaking to other people who might know something about this. Finally, once they've done their shortlist, now they need to make a decision. They're actually evaluating and trying to come to that final decision. So I know that I'm looking at company X, Y, and Z. Now I need to figure out which one of them is going to deserve my business. Interestingly, paid search advertising actually is about the same popularity. Again, and I think this will be a surprise to most people, social media postings comes down even more as a popular source of information. So when people are down to the phase where they've already shortlisted and they're trying to compare one company to another, you're now down to maybe 1 out of 5 buyers that are saying that social media postings are an important source of information for them. Exhibitions and trade shows, once again, almost 1 out of 2. Now, contact by a salesperson, because we hear a lot of talk about, hey, you know, people do most of their searching without ever speaking with someone. It's becoming, you know, they only hit that the very, very end of the funnel. They actually hit the sales team. What we're seeing here that throughout the whole process, need search and evaluation, contact by a salesperson is important, but it does jump when it comes to the evaluation phase. So if you've got a company that's shortlisted you, if you're not talking to them, if you're not reaching out to them, if you don't have a good conversation with them, you're missing out on a little over 1 out of 2 people who think that that is one of the most important information sources for them. Again, review sites, word of mouth. When people are trying to choose between companies, they are going to be going online and they're going to be looking at sites to see how do you compare, how do you rank, and they're going to be speaking to their colleagues and their friends to find out who has an opinion on you. So these sources cannot be ignored. Now, in addition to looking at what information sources, where do people go to get their information when they're in the buying process, the study also took a look to say, okay, what channel do you prefer? As Daryl mentioned, or maybe Andrew mentioned, VanillaSoft is a sales engagement platform. So we're designed to drive engagement across channels through multi-channel approaches. So we wanted to find out, when you ask buyers, what channel do you prefer to use? How do you prefer to be contacted? We wanted to see what are their preferences. Is it truly a multi-channel approach? Are people truly expecting to be contacted through all sorts of different channels, and do they appreciate each of those channels the same? So let's walk through the same need, search, and evaluation phases. So in the need phase, SMS was the least preferred channel of communication, coming in at about 1 out of 10 people. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying that most of the buyers that we approached in this survey were B2B. So this is mostly a business-to-business sales process. So that may change a little bit the popularity of SMS. My guess is that with a much larger sample of business-to-consumer buyers, we'd probably see a higher popularity on the SMS. But as we can see, during the need phase, SMS, not very important. Social media. This is actually mirroring what we saw as an information source. A little under 1 out of 5 people identified social media as a channel that they prefer a lot or prefer a great deal when they're trying to identify products that they need. Now, here's maybe the big surprise for people, because we hear a lot of talk about how the phone is dead. In fact, we've been hearing it, I've been in this business for about 15 years, and I've been hearing it for at least 15 years. The phone is dead, people aren't using it anymore, people don't answer, the new generation doesn't want to take calls. This survey does not reflect that. In fact, phone is the second most popular channel for getting a hold of buyers, sitting at almost 1 out of 3 saying that that is what they prefer when they're trying to identify and trying to figure out what type of needs they have. Finally, probably no big surprise, email. It has become kind of the default channel in a lot of sales programs, and we can see that people do like email. Now, what happens when they've identified their need and they're now trying to shortlist their companies? SMS, slightly more popular, but still not very popular. Social media, just like we saw in the information sources, actually coming down in popularity. So we're now down to about 13.5% of people that say that during the search phase, trying to figure out which company they want, they're actually going to go and rely on social media. So we were a little surprised with this. Phone actually increases in popularity. So we're seeing that as you're going through the buying process, the phone is actually becoming more popular as a channel. Email, down slightly, but around the same, and email still remains the preferred option, or one of the preferred options, when you're trying to shortlist or get a hold of which companies you need to be speaking with. Finally, let's move to the evaluation phase. And once again, this is an important one. I'm now on that shortlist. How do I get myself chosen? How do I make sure that our company's product is the one that wins the day? Again, SMS rated the same as in search. Social media, we're now down to 1 out of 10 people that say that they like this channel when it comes to that final phase of the buying process. So 1 out of 10 people. Again, I've said this a couple of times, we were surprised. With all the hype that social media gets, with all the talk there is about, and especially LinkedIn when it comes to business, to see that only 1 out of 10 people indicate that they like social media as a channel when they're in the process of making that buying decision, of actually choosing between companies that they've shortlisted, it's a little abysmal. Now, here's maybe another surprise to people, but I don't think to a lot of salespeople. The phone actually jumps considerably in the evaluation phase. So here we're talking about 2 out of 5 people rate this as very, very important to them as part of the evaluation process. And this makes sense. Social media, you can read about things, SMS, but phone is truly interactive. Phone is when you can engage and you can really learn not just about a company, but about the type of people that are behind that company. So we see phone take a real jump when it comes to preferences for being contacted. Finally, email still stays up there, still an important one. Now, I talked a little bit about the beginning about how it's going to be interesting when the final research is out to see whether people actually walk the talk. So in other words, they're saying they like phone, but do they really respond to it? They're saying they like email, but do they really respond to it? So especially on the email side, I personally do wonder whether part of the popularity of email is it allows me as the buyer to be in complete control. In other words, do I decide that I'm going to read it? Do I decide to reply to it? I can delete it very easily. Phone, you can make the decision, do I pick it up or not? But once you picked it up, you're in a conversation. So from a buyer's perspective, it's a little harder to cut that off. Whereas with email, once again, I receive the email, I decide whether to delete it or not, I decide whether to reply to it or not. So part of the preference there might not just be the fact that you can deliver quite a bit of information over email. It might also be that it's easy for me to decide not to look at that information, and easier than it would be, for example, over the phone. So we've now seen how people prefer to get their information as they're going through a buying process, and we've seen what channels, how do they like to be approached? And once again, we looked at the 4 main channels: SMS, social media, phone, and email. And it's given quite a few insights in terms of how we should be approaching those buyers. Now, I'm going to kind of shortcut one of the objections that I can definitely hear coming from people, which would be a question of social media. So, age groups, people would probably say, would make a huge difference when it comes to social media. In other words, the younger generation the young people, they want to use social media, and they do not want to use the phone. It's only older people like me that are still taking phone calls, that still actually want to speak to somebody. Nobody else does. So we actually carried out an analysis by age group for social media and phone to actually check that, to find out, is this just reflect the age of the people that were in the survey? And we did find some differences. So we can see at the left, the 25 to 34 age group, 18% of them did rate social media highly. And as we go to 35 to 44, it's only 9%. And almost a surprise for me, 45 and on, nobody did. Nobody from the 45 and on age group said, social media, I like that as a channel. So we do see that for the younger buyers, social media is more important. But what's really interesting is it still rates below the phone. No matter what age group we look at, social media is less popular than the phone. So we're seeing 41% of the 25 to 34, 30% of 35 to 44, and then as you go on and get older, phone does become more and more important. So we do see a difference when it comes to age groups and how they react to social media, but we still see, and I think, again, this will be a surprise to a lot of people, that phone ranks higher than social media across all age groups.
Hey, David, it's Andrew. Let me jump in with a question if I could. Social media has been getting a lot of buzz. It's kind of the in thing. Social selling is a big part of the discussion, especially with influencers. Given how social media is ranking here compared to other channels, do the experts have it wrong? Is it overhyped, or what do you see as a takeaway regarding that?
I'd really hesitate to say that they've got it wrong. I think it is absolutely hyped at the moment. It's the thing that everyone's talking about. But the results that we see here may actually reflect kind of the experience and how long social media has been in the sales process. So email, we've been selling by email for, decades now. The phone, we've been selling by phone for generations now. Social media, it's really only been used as a sales tool in the last few years, and it's really only gained popularity. And when we say social media, when it comes to selling, I think most companies, especially on the B2B side, are going to think automatically of LinkedIn, also Facebook as well. Really, those have only been used as sales tools for a very short period of time compared to the phone and the email channel. So I actually think that we'll see these results change, maybe not very quickly, but change over time as people get better at selling over social media, as they get better at informing over social media. I think that we'll see social media become more important. So this simply may be a reflection of the fact that a lot of companies do it, they just don't do it well.
Yeah, thank you. I agree.
So, at the very beginning, Daryl mentioned a little bit about speed to contact. There was a very famous study that came out, I think it was in 2008, that basically told everyone you need to respond within 5 minutes when somebody submits an inquiry to your site or when somebody asks to be contacted. And that if you didn't respond within 5 minutes, I can't recall the exact stats, but it was something like you were 5 times less likely to be able to close that sale if you didn't get back within that first 5 minutes. Now, we carried out an initial study, and this was the data-driven study where we looked at the 130 million sales interactions, and of those, 2.5 million of them were web leads, so in other words, submitted forms. And by analyzing the data, we'd actually found something different. We found that responding within the first 5 minutes, on average, could actually reduce your close rate. In other words, for some reason, we don't know why, people didn't necessarily like it. It did not lead to success. And in fact, it was that 30 minutes to an hour that was the sweet spot. That was when people really wanted to hear back from you. We had some ideas about what might be behind that. There could be the kind of the creep factor, right? People, you hit the send button on your form, and next thing you know, your phone's ringing or you've got an email, and and you're going, this is kind of weird. They're following me. It may also have been that people simply weren't ready, right? I just finished doing this. My mind is not yet ready to switch over to taking that call or actually respond to that email. Whatever it was, we thought it'd be really interesting to ask buyers now, when do you want to be contacted after you submit a form? Now, immediately, within 5 minutes, did okay. About 1 out of 5, 1 out of 4 people wanted to be contacted immediately. But if we look at the next two categories that make up almost 3/4 of respondents' preferences, it's within about 30 minutes or later within the same day. So in other words, the large majority, about 3 times more buyers, don't want to be contacted right away. They don't see that as a positive thing. They would rather be contacted soon. So 30 minutes later in the same day. So it's actually pretty revealing, and it corresponds to what we saw in the study carried out by the Telfer School of Management when actually looking at the data of forms that have been submitted and which ones of those ended up leading to a sale. Now, so the good news is it doesn't look like that 5 minutes is an absolute. Now, I'm going to go into the gray area a little bit here. It probably does depend on what type of form. If someone's submitting a form that says contact me immediately, and that's the name of the form, you probably want to be contacted immediately. Call me now, you wanted to be call me now. So you have to be a little careful as you look at the data. But overall, people just want to be contacted within a reasonable time frame. So that's great news, because for a lot of organizations, trying to be able to get in touch with people within 5 minutes of submission is next to impossible. Now, the bad news, most organizations aren't even getting a hold of people within the 30 minutes or later the same day. So you still have to be looking at your processes and going, yeah, it doesn't have to be right away, but it has to be fairly quickly. So it's doable. 30 minutes later in the same day, that is very doable if you have the systems and processes in place. So it's not something you should look at as, unaccomplishable. You can do it, but you're going to have to work at it to be able to do it. So that's the results that came out for us on the speed to contact. And once again, backed up previous research we had done about 3 years ago that kind of turned on its head the old common accepted statement from the early 2000s. One of the other things we wanted to find out from buyers, what's most important in terms of competency? So in other words, this is at the stage where you're in contact with a salesperson. This could be across channels. So in other words, I'm getting emails, I'm getting SMS, I'm seeing social media posts, or I'm getting a call. But what are you going to evaluate in terms of competency of that person that you're interacting with? What's most important to you? So we asked about persistency. So in other words, is it important to you that the person follows up? About 1/3 said yes. Now, interestingly, if we go back and look at the data-driven results, persistency is incredibly important. So in other words, when we analyze data from engagement and say which of those engagements led to a sale, we're going to see that persistency is incredibly important. When you ask the buyer, it's okay. It's important, but not that important. Competitor knowledge, about 1 out of 2. Think that you knowing, and when you're a salesperson and you're reaching out, you knowing about your competitors is important. Industry knowledge, more important than competitor knowledge. We're now up to almost 70% of people that say, I want the salesperson I'm speaking with to know about the industry. However, there's 2 that really, came out on top when it comes to competency. So when your salespeople or when you as a salesperson are reaching out and contacting potential buyers, they want you to know the product you're selling, and they want you to understand their business needs. And when you think about it, these 2 actually go together. Understanding a business needs, that's important so you can actually understand what are their pain points. So this is a very traditional sales thing, right? I think every sales consultant would say you have to understand what the pain points are. What are those business needs? But you also have to have the product knowledge to be able to relate what you can do back to those business needs. So in other words, it's fine understanding that you're not getting back to your leads quick enough and that you're only doing 2 follow-up calls. If you're not able to articulate how the product and the solution that you're pitching them is actually going to address that specifically, then you're not meeting the buyer's needs. So this is a great little piece of information for every sales manager as they're starting to look and going, okay, should I, if I do some sales consulting, some sales training, what should we concentrate on? Start with product knowledge and the ability and analysis of business needs. Finally, we thought, as long as we're doing this survey, we've got the study out, we kind of wanted to throw in one of our pet peeves. So Daryl and I both have this pet peeve. When people are sending me an email and they'd like to schedule an appointment with me, I hate it when all they do is they put in a link and they said, hey, would love to meet with you. Click on this link and find a time that works. For me, I don't read that as find a time that works for you. I read that as find a time that works for me, for the salesperson. And I'm sitting there thinking, well, that's not very proactive. Why should I bother taking my time to go look at your calendar to figure out what works for you? So again, just a little pet peeve. Other people love that. Some people love being able to go into the rep's calendar and do that. I like it when someone actually proposes a couple of times and said, what works for you? So we asked the question, what's your preference for setting an appointment when people are emailing you? And it almost came out, not quite even, but when you look at this, it's almost an even split. 24% like it when somebody proposes several times. So I guess I'm in the minority on that one. 41% do like to pick the slot from the rep's calendar. 35% like to write back and say, here's when I'm available. Which of that ones works for you? So what's the lesson to take from this? Everyone you're reaching out to may have a pet peeve and you don't know what it is. So you may as well try and cover all bases and just propose every possible way for setting that appointment with them. So if we look at some of the conclusions, and again, as Daryl pointed out at the beginning, this is very raw data. The study was carried out in March, April. It is an empirical study, so the analysis is still being carried out on it. This study is designed to lead to several different academic papers. The problem with academia is that it can take several years for the peer review, for everything to be rewritten, to get actually published. The great thing about it, though, is, again, it doesn't have industry bias. Academics aren't looking for a particular answer. They're looking to see what does the data say, and then you try and figure out what does that mean for me. So if we just look at this very initial data, what can we read from it? What does it mean to us? So first of all, information sources. If you are not actively working with review sites, then you are really missing out. Word of mouth, very important, although as I've argued often with people, word of mouth is not a strategy. Word of mouth is a byproduct. You get good word of mouth because of what you've done. Now, review sites, it's a little bit the same, except there are strategies to make sure that you're getting reviews. The other really interesting thing is contact by a salesperson continues to increase in importance throughout the buying cycle. So if you think you can take a hands-off approach, if you think people are going to completely self-inform, in most cases, that's not going to work. Communication channels. Email is popular, and we talked about some of the reasons why that might be. SMS, at least in B2B, is still not as popular as some of us might think it should be. As we talk about the demise of the telephone, the fact that nobody wants to answer anymore, that's just not the case. People may not like to make phone calls as much, and I know a lot of us have trouble or really have to work at getting our salespeople to make those calls, but people are still answering, and the phone still rates higher than social media across all age groups and all stages of the buying cycle. Speed to lead. The majority of buyers prefer not to be contacted immediately. They do, however, want to be contacted in a reasonable time frame. So if you wait more than 24 hours, I believe, if I remember correctly, that was about 4% of people that thought that was okay. So you're missing out a lot if you cannot get back to them the same day. Finally, competency. What do our salespeople really need to know? First and foremost, product knowledge and an understanding of the business needs of the industry that they're calling into. They can have everything else, but if they don't have those two particular competencies, they're going to run into problems and you're not going to be selling. So Daryl, I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you, my friend. I have a question for you, David. Just looking at your channel slide, you talked about how email was, of course, the #1 preferred channel, whether it was in need, search, or evaluation. But the phone was #2, and it kind of, it more than doubled social media, and of course, email doubled phone. But it got me to wondering, because if you listen everywhere, all the sales folks are saying phone is dead. What I hear all the time is people saying, I don't answer the phone, or nobody answers the phone. And yet, the data doesn't show that. So my question is this, and I don't know if you know the answer. I know this is a study of over 2,000 buyers. Is this the phone is dead construct something that sales reps are pushing forth because they themselves don't like to use the phone? They prefer the efficiency or the safety of a text-based interface like email or social media, because clearly the buyers do like the phone. Any idea on that, even if it's just your own opinion?
Yeah, you know what? I do wonder whether there isn't some of that. What I find interesting is when you're talking to sales managers, you pretty much know the answer. When you ask them, are you having trouble getting your sales reps to send enough emails? How many of them do you think say, yeah, I really can't get my salespeople to send emails? Not very many.
Not very many.
Now, when you ask them, are you having trouble getting your salespeople to make phone calls? What do you think?
The answer is always yes. The biggest complaint people have is how quiet the sales room is anymore.
Exactly. So again, this data obviously doesn't give us an answer to that question. However, from all the conversations, we speak with hundreds of sales managers and sales directors a month. Again, the answers to those two questions are almost always the same. So it does have to make you wonder whether part of this we don't really need to call, it's not that important anymore, is coming from the fact that it just simply happens to be the harder channel because it's the more personal channel. It's the one where you're really involved. You're putting yourself on the line. However, that's probably why it's such a popular channel with the buyers, because that's your real opportunity to interact. And like I said, not just learn about the product, but you learn about the company. You learn about the people. And I do agree with a lot of the people out there saying, hey, I don't buy from the person, I'm still buying the product. But the person has an influence. And so when you can wrap that all up in one package, I think that's what leaves the phone still as a very important communication channel.
I'm just thinking for all the sales leaders, sales managers who are online right now listening to this, if your reps are out there telling you that, the phone is dead and that's why I don't do it, I have far better success than email or anything else. Show them this stat, show them this information, challenge them, because buyers are clearly saying the phone is important to them, even at the beginning stages of the sales process. Anyway, that's just my observation. Andrew, over to you. Where are we on Q&A? Anybody want to talk to us?
Yeah, we got a couple of good questions coming in, Daryl. I wanted to throw one at you first before we jump into the audience one. Just reminder to the audience, too, go ahead and type your questions right in the Q&A tab. But Daryl, we talked a lot about what sales leaders can take away from this and some really great insights that I think the candidates should apply. In your role as a marketer, and I know a lot of your customers are in the marketing side as well, what would you say are takeaways that a CMO or a head of marketing should apply from this as well? I mean, when you think about it across the takeaways across channels, a lot of marketers are obviously much more involved in revenue. Some are taking over inside sales. So what would you say from a CMO's perspective some of the most interesting takeaways would be?
So a big thing for me, that's a great question, actually, Andrew. It's a really relevant question because if I look back, I'm thinking about what David shared with us, and he talked about different information sources. How do people get their information? How does it change over the need versus the search versus the evaluation? And what that shows me as a marketer is I need to have content based on, for example, review sites. That's got to be a huge investment for me. And I need to understand that for other sites, like, for example, organic search is most important in the need side, but, far less important in the search than the evaluation side. So those are just two examples. So if I'm doing organic search and trying to optimize that, I want to make sure I'm optimizing for content and searches that would be relevant at the need stage. Whereas the review sites, it applies across the board. I want to make sure that I'm using it across the board. So whether that would be me using things like G2 and showing how great I am as they're doing an organic search, or maybe me showing that at a trade show booth because they're doing some more research, or me doing that, again, having that badge on a white paper if they move to the funnel, or me actually making sure that badge is in an actual sales proposal at the end of the process, the evaluation stage. It doesn't change. I have to use that everywhere, not just one place. So a lot of this data really shows me the content I need to make for them to use. The other side it really shows me is the importance of the mix, the different channels, right? So again, for me as a marketer, I want to make sure my leads are being followed. And if sales folks are saying, no, we're not making any phone calls, or we made one, nobody answered, I left a voicemail, and everything else is email or social, I'm going to freak out because I paid a lot of money to generate that lead, and I need you to engage with the buyer in the manner they want to be engaged. So there's a lot of information. That's just a few things here, but it really changes my go-to-market strategy and my qualification strategy.
Yeah, those are great points. I thought that was some of the most interesting things about the research, too, is being able to look at the impact by stage and by channel. All right, let's jump into some questions from the audience. And David and Daryl, maybe you can both offer your thoughts here. So, David, the research talked a lot about, the communication across channels. It also talked about competency. Maria is in a sales enablement role, it sounds like, and she said, do you see or certain organizations that are effective with their sales teams translating knowledge of industries and product across email, social, and telephone? So how do you add competency into across channels?
Yeah, and I'll be honest, I think I'm a perfect example of how important this is, because when I'm looking at emails and deciding, do I bother replying, or even bother continue reading past the first few sentences, they need to pretty quickly be addressing some issue that I care about. So in other words, down to the business needs side of thing. Now, they don't know me yet. It's going to be pretty general. But if I can't see right away that they have a good understanding of what my business needs probably are, I'm not opening that email. And this may, again, be a problem when we talk about how social media is not as popular as we think it is, quite honestly. As we look at the buyer's reaction, we're seeing that it is not as popular as everyone's telling us. That may partly be because of the type of content which is on social media right now. I'll be honest, I find a lot of social media posts are fluff pieces. There's really nothing behind them. Sometimes it can be an interesting opinion piece, I guess, but a lot of times it's just that. There's just opinions. There's really nothing to it. So again, this ability to communicate your competency, to speak to requirements and speak to needs, be it through email, be it through social media. Now, it's interesting because on the phone, it's incredibly important as well, but on the phone, you get immediate feedback, right? If you're not addressing their needs, you're going to know about it right away. Where somebody can seem to write a 2,000-word social media post and never have any idea that no one cares. So the phone does at least give you that immediate feedback. But you need to be demonstrating those competencies across every communication channel.
Daryl, if you could quickly add to that, are there any examples or customers you're working with that, are they using email templates? Are they doing scripts for calls? What's some of the ways that you're seeing them apply that competency across channels?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a couple ways we can do this, right? So clearly, as David mentioned, VanillaSoft itself is a sales engagement platform, so we have a lot of the functionality built into it for scripts and content and everything else to make sure that they're adding value. The challenge you have is on channels like social media. So because, even with a tool like VanillaSoft or any other sales engagement solutions, that can be a sales loft or an outreach where they have cadences and you embed that capability, is that when it gets to social media, there really is no tool for that, and that's the challenge. So David hit it right, which is really about, he talked about competency and how you're doing it, but the big thing is adding value. Isn't it interesting that David's first comment was, it's a fluff piece. So, I know we go out of our way to always add value. For example, here's a good example. Why did we as a vendor sign on to help Google produce this study? Because we knew the findings that you're seeing today will add value and will cause the recipient to go, I can learn something from these people. What else can they teach me? I'm intrigued. Email is the same way. Whenever we craft our emails, whether we're doing it from a marketing point of view or we're doing it as a template for our sales reps, we just literally did a webinar on this. You can see it at VanillaSoft.com. It's about, excuse the language, it's about, shitty emails. We went through samples and samples of emails, but we had a formula. The formula, we said, this is actually how you should write an email, and it was called reply, R-E-P-L-Y. And the R stood for results, which means right away, you want to share some kind of results that will catch my interest as the recipient. Again, I'm adding value. And then the E stands for empathy, which is you want to connect with me in my role and in my position on something that matters to me, the life I'm living. And David spoke literally to that. He said, if you don't know the world I'm living in, don't waste my time. I'm paraphrasing, but that's the gist of what he said. So that's how an email should be structured. All those tools, sales engagement, for example, can really help with that. But in social media, that's more of a training thing and a discipline that you have to instill upon all your sales reps.
Okay, great. Good. Darryl, follow up with the point about telephone and some really eye-opening stats I think coming out of that, because so many people are writing it off, probably because salespeople, it's hard, it's personal. Question from Peter in the audience. He said, with robo dialers and et cetera, more resistance to what would be, he put, cold calls. So David or Darryl, any thoughts you have on how sales organizations or B2B organizations are effectively using phone at different stages? Is there sort of a way to be more relevant and valuable to executives as you're reaching out via phone?
I'll let you take that, David.
Sure. Well, first of all, I'd like to say here at VanillaSoft, when we started off in 2005, predictive dialing was kind of at its apogee. Everyone was using it. It was going to be fantastic. We have never believed in, call it robo-dialing and predictive dialing. We have never believed in that from the beginning. And I think it has caused a lot of the bad press that we get around the telephone. At the end of the day, we are dealing with companies that are making quality calls, that are reaching out, that can truly help the people they're reaching out to and the people that they're phoning. That means that they're willing to invest the time to actually make a call, not have some computer dialing hundreds of numbers and then, which basically is just telling the person you're calling that they're not important enough for you to bother spending the 30 seconds of salary on a person just in case they don't answer. So in other words, their time is worth nothing to us and our time is worth something. So we're really against that type of dialing. It has had an impact, but people are still picking up the phone. I think there's a traditional problem still with predictive dialing. I tell you, if I pick up the phone and there's any pause whatsoever, I just hang up right away. So it's to be engaging. You can't really affect whether people are going to answer or not. We've done studies and we've got empirical studies showing calling at different days, calling at different times. You can get small differences, but you're not going to have a large impact upon who's going to pick up the phone. So the important thing is when they do pick up the phone, you need to be ready. And this comes right back to what we just said. Within that first 15 or 20 seconds, that person needs to understand why should they stay on the phone, what's in it for them. So it really is a lot in the training at that point.
The other thing there, to talk about the phone, it's really kind of everything in aggregate, right? So if the stats say most reps will make 2 call attempts or 2 attempts to engage with a buyer and then walk away. But we also know the same stats say you have to make anywhere, depending on your study that you believe, from 6 to 8 attempts to engage with them. So, it's kind of like branding, right? I use the example of I can drive by a billboard, 10 times before I finally see it and go, oh, where'd that billboard come from? Sometimes we need to be hit over the head over and over and over again. And it's not just being hit on the head over and over again, it's also the variety. So if you phone me and you ping me on social and you ping me on email, I will hear you, both because of the frequency and because of the variety. And the nice thing is when you do that, you kind of indirectly give me as the buyer the choice in how I want to engage with you. Okay, you've given me how your coordinates on phone, on email, and social. I prefer social, so I will respond on that channel. Or I prefer phone. If I'm David, as a good example, I will respond on that channel. So, having that omni-channel engagement really does ensure that you have the highest chances of connecting on a channel preferred by your buyer, which is good for you because that starts a relationship up on, in a manner that the buyer is most comfortable.
Yep, great points. All right, we're getting toward the top of the hour. I'm going to get one more question in before we wrap up. So, David, the speed to lead research was really interesting for me. Katie in the audience said that that she should strike a real balance between being too fast, too slow. Does this require automation? She's asking, and technologies for organizations to make sure the following up is occurring at the right time.
Based on the studies that we've seen of how quickly companies on average respond to inbound leads, I'd say yes. Because as I mentioned, unfortunately, a lot of companies are failing at even getting back to leads the same day. Now, our research shows, and this particular study shows that it doesn't have to be 1 minute, 2 minutes after. That might be hard to do, but every company should be able to respond and get back to people within 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours on the same day. But it's going to take both technology and processes. So I would say absolutely, based on what we see in the industry and the fact that people aren't doing it, they need to be looking at platforms that are going to allow them to do it.
Something to think about there, too, is, we talk about technology, right? And as the audience is going, well, what does that mean? Where do I start? What technology do I get? Part of it is that it's not necessarily the technology, although it is. It's the user interface. Think about Salesforce.com, not a knock against them. It's a list-based interface. You log in, what do you see? You see a list of the calls you need to make. And so you're manually clicking on each of those items and calling or emailing. And you can, because you're the buyer, the sales rep, you can choose to skip items. This is what sales managers hate. Reps cherry pick. So now imagine a new hot lead comes in on the website. Number one, your list isn't auto-refreshing. Number two, if it does pop in there because maybe you refreshed it or you logged out, you logged back in again, it could be 3/4 through that list because the list is sorted in some parameter that doesn't put it at the top. There's no way it can show you, this is a hot lead, call this one now. So sometimes it's not just the technology, it's also the user interface. I know at VanillaSoft, we use a queue, and what a queue does is it gets rid of the list, so we always present the next best lead to you. And the beauty of the queue is that we can jump a lead to the front of the queue, so that then, as soon as you dealt with this lead, boom, that web lead is, front and center and presented with you next. So all I'm saying is, it's not just technology, sometimes it's the user interface. So when you're evaluating your tech stack, have that in mind.
All right, this has been great. I really appreciate you guys bringing this research. I thought it was a great addition to the series. So thank you, David and Daryl, for answering the questions and presenting this great data.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you.
All right, some quick reminders for everybody in terms of the series. Stay tuned for the rest of the week and check out the agenda. These sessions will be available on demand as well, so go back and tell your peers. Also, a reminder to save the dates for our physical events. Our next one is the B2B Sales and Marketing Exchange, which will present a lot of similar great content in person. That's going to be at the new Boston Encore Hotel, and it's August 12th to the 13th. Hopefully you can join us there. And against some lucky prize winners, we'll be getting free passes to that. Also, keep in mind that the next session in the series will be July 17th at 12 p.m. We're going to be looking at using your own survey-based insights like the ones we're doing today to identify key buyer triggers in your contact database. So hopefully you can join us for that. Thanks again, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.